guys, welcome to my channel. Today we have a special guest star. This is Miss Ginger Snaps, and we're going to be doing a little bit of a follow-up video to the video that I did about aerial body types a couple weeks ago. So welcome, thank you for doing this. Can you say a little bit about like what you do and maybe how you got started with aerial?
Okay, so I am an aerialist and burlesque performer and teacher as well, and producer. I like to do a lot of things. And I started out as a burlesque performer, and I kept being in shows with aerialists, and we would talk a little bit about it, and they'd be like, "Hey, come to our studio, try it out." And I did. I went and tried it. I was not any good at it, but I had a lot of fun, and so I kept going back.
What did you try
Oh,
out
mine
first?
was actually hammock. I was all about hammock for a really long time, and I just didn't like the feel of steel. But my good friend Andy, who was my first lyra teacher, was like, just come try it out. So after 6 weeks, once I realized, oh wait, I can do everything in really fast spins, I switched to lyra. And I primarily perform lyra and sphere, and sometimes I'll do a little trapeze, and if I'm feeling masochistic, I'll bring the moon out.
You really were attracted to like the spin to start off with. Was that something that always felt comfortable for you, or did you kind of have to learn how to do it, adjust to not being dizzy or not being ill?
I have always been a big speed freak, so I loved that I could go really fast. I never really had issues with nausea, ate the wrong thing beforehand or something. So initially for me, yes, there was a good bit of dizziness, and I would just get used to it. But I know that realistically, I take to it and have it easier than most people when they start learning how to spin. So I teach a lot of spin and a lot of spin theory because I'm just really into it, and I think it's so much
Yeah.
fun.
I find that many students like they come to it and they kind of think it's just like being able to do it or not be able to do it. And there's actually a lot of technique to spin.
Yes, yeah. My funniest though is when I have people that try to spot during their aerial spin, and I'm like, look, if
Yeah.
you can spot, you're going too slow. Zone out, let your eyes disassociate. If you feel like you have to focus on something, look up at the apparatus. Like, there have been so many times, especially like for television shows, where they light you so bright that
Mm.
when you're in spin, it's like distracting. So sometimes I'll close my eyes for a second just to orient myself to my apparatus and not be distracted by fastly spinning lights.
That's something that I've been trying to focus on a lot recently is like I've got my little LED lights like
Oh, yeah.
that I use for my videos. But I now, when I train at home or if I train somewhere where I can easily take them, I just train with them all the time. First of all, what language do you prefer? Because I honestly don't know. Do you prefer plus size? Do you prefer bigger? Like, what's the way that you
You
prefer
know,
to think about that?
it's a hard thing because everybody prefers something different. I usually go with either plus size or fat, and I like to use fat simply because people treat it like such a negative word. So someone will say, "Oh, well, I'm fat." And they're like, "No, you're not fat. You're beautiful." And I'm like, "I didn't say I was ugly. I said I was fat. It's a descriptor. I can be both." So, as far as my class I teach, I keep it to intro for plus size bodies because I find that plus size encompasses the wide ranges of those body types, and it's something people can self-identify as, and it's not the type of language that anyone is particularly offended by. But a lot of my classes like just using fat. I kind of gauge it depending on the students.
What kind of range of bodies do you get in your classes normally? Like what levels as well?
So it's a wide range, and I always have a really wide range of body types in there. So I'll have people that may be like a US size 12, and then I'll have people that are going to be a lot larger and don't have a lot of movement experience but really just want to try something new. It's all across the board. So I'll have some people that maybe came from a dance background, and then other people that are like, I've never done anything like this and I don't know what my core is. And we're like, all right, that's cool. We can start from all these different places.
I find that really when I teach, especially absolute, this is my first class, beginner classes, you it's really surprising the range that you get. Because I think there is like a stereotype of people who are trying aerial for the first time are active people, like have a history of dance or a history of sports or something. But so often
Mhm.
I'll get people who have literally never done anything with their body before.
Yeah, and that happens a lot, and that's okay. There is no rule.
Yeah.
Like, so many people think they have to have a certain amount of strength before they start or a certain amount of flexibility. And I'm like, well, you get that by doing it. you of course can take concurrent classes, or if you're like, well, I just want to focus on building those things before I try an aerial class, that's okay too. But it's
Mhm.
not necessary. You'll get them as we go.
I see now a lot people who are on social media who are saying like, oh, I want to try an aerial class or a pole class as soon as I'm able to do this. And it's like, what do you think doing the class is going to teach you? You don't go to class,
Exactly.
it's already perfect.
So those kind of issues increase 20-fold in the plus
I
size
can imagine,
community
yeah.
because they have been told stuff like this their whole lives about anything physical. So when you've been told this repeatedly by everyone from family members to society at large, it's something people tend to believe. So much of my class is just spent getting these ideas out of their head and helping people realize that your body is capable of these things and that your blocks are mostly mental and the rest we can figure out as we go.
You get a lot of people who have a preconceived notion of what their body does and what they're allowed to do with their body. And
Yes.
I can imagine that, when it becomes like a not only like your personal anxiety, but sort of a society supported anxiety, it must be
Yeah,
really difficult.
there's a lot of barrier to entry issues that come up. I've been getting messages for a couple years now from people who just say that they didn't know they were allowed to do aerials as a plus size person, or that they went to a studio and the studio told them they had a mysterious weight limit and therefore they couldn't be there. And I hear that one a lot. I even talked to one person who, even after she'd been going to the school for quite a few months, the director pulled her out of class one day and said she had to weigh her, and then said that she was too big to be there, which is insane to me. So I actually ended up doing
Oh.
a little TikTok rant about why weight limits in these kinds of aerial classes don't make sense. It's one thing if you're doing something very specialized, but anything that has to do with intro aerials or aerial yoga, if there's a weight limit, they either have equipment, poorly trained instructors, or they're just plain being fat phobic.
I watched your rant about weight limits in studios, and it was really great. Like I'll put a link in the description
And
to
I
it.
got out of bed to do that, and I was like, man, I should have like brushed my hair or something.
It was very spontaneous. It was great. This is something that I encountered a lot as a dancer was weigh-ins and other people or people who are your boss, are your ballet master, are people who are in control of what you're doing, uh, enforcing you to monitor your weight. And that to me is inexcusable, especially with people who are athletes, people who are dancers, people who are artists, and our bodies are so much a part of our lives.
People get like weirdly offended when they see people in larger bodies accomplishing things that they told themselves they had to shrink themselves to be able to do, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, that wasn't the case, I didn't have to do that. So instead of being like, oh great, let's celebrate that, they don't want that person to succeed because it makes them feel bad.
I think that's super insightful because I do think a lot of the time when you are getting very negative energy from someone, it's because you are breaking some sort of line that they drew for themselves. And like their excuse was, this is not possible because of this, or this can't be done because of this. And if they see someone pushing that line, then they're not going to be able to have that excuse for themselves anymore. And I think a lot of times, a lot of negativity comes from that kind of a place.
What I tell them, I'm like, the only difference your weight makes is that you're going to build larger muscles to move yourself around. You are the only one pulling your weight around. Every bit of equipment in our studio is rated for 5,000 pounds and is totally suitable for doubles, triples, things like that. So if you go into a studio, see two small people on an aerial apparatus, why can they not have one large person? And all of these things are incredibly testable. This isn't a mystery. Usually the most mysterious component in any aerial setup is going to be the apparatus itself, which is why we get our apparatus from reputable people who can give us appropriate limits for them, and we inspect the apparatus regularly. So I'm just not here for people's excuses about it.
I'm going to pause right there and look into the camera and say, check your apparatus. Do not assume because it was okay when you bought it that it's still okay 6 years later. Check your apparatus. And if you don't know what to look for, ask someone else to check your apparatus.
Know what a good weld should look like.
Yes. Know what a good weld and know what wear looks like. with your experience in the aerial world, what would you like to see change about the aerial world? And what do you think needs to be changed?
There is so much to it and at so many different levels. I will say, as a plus size performer, when I get requests about doing professional aerial work, it's usually specifically aerial burlesque. So the professional circus world likes to sexualize and fetishize plus size bodies, but they don't use them enough in regular work. And I would like to see more of that. I want to see larger bodies outside of Zumanity, where it's not just, oh my, isn't that unique? Look who we have. You know, there should be more than 3 professional plus size aerialists out there, but people are not aware that this is an opportunity. And not only do I think it's socially irresponsible, but as studios and as shows that want to bring people in to make money, you are missing a huge demographic. People like to see themselves reflected on stage. I've been voted the best burlesque performer in Austin for the past 4 years running, and part of that is because people want to see bodies that look like them on stage. It's just a huge opportunity being missed and a huge disservice being done to people, and I would just like to see more of that across the board.
Each move looks so different with each body type that when you see different people doing things, the amount of variety that you can get is so amazing.
Yeah, it's such a big difference, and I talk about this in my class a lot too, because like I'll teach the moves and I'll be like, look, you're never gonna see me put this move in an act of mine, because for instance, like Man in the Moon, when I do Man in the Moon, I look like Fat Man in a little coat. Because it's not only do I have a chubby body that doesn't compress well, but I'm severely sway backed. So that means it's not a great move for me, but I still want my students to try it. And we talk about what works for them, what doesn't, what alternatives feel and look better on their body for them if they don't want to do that. We just want to make sure that they have that information.
I always feel like I look like a girl with her knee in her mouth because like,
Yeah, I'm just like,
and you may not have an opinion on this, but do you feel like there are certain apparatuses that are easier to start off with if you're plus size, or do you feel like it's more just a personal preference thing?
I think it honestly depends on the person. Right now in my class, we alternate between lyra and hammock, and I usually start on hammock. Just because I feel like that one can be a little easier to initially invert in and kind of find your way around, but a lot of people don't like that restricting. They don't like having to move the apparatus around them, so then they prefer lyra. I don't normally start people right off on silks, just because I think climbing can be really intimidating. And
So
when I,
hard to start on silks.
yeah,
In general, my preference leans towards hard apparatus like lyra, trapeze, pole. Now I've learned to love like the tissues, but I feel like a lot of people they kind of start out with a strong preference to one of those. Do you find that sometimes?
typically, for sure, yeah. And that's why I always like to have a mix of that in my intro class so that they have an idea of what these two different things are.
Moving on from like the classroom to professional work, can you talk a little bit about like how your journey has been as a plus size aerialist doing professional jobs?
You know, I was performing professionally in burlesque before I got into aerial, and I always did my own productions locally as well. So I started doing that for my studio, and I am the performance manager for Sky Candy. From there, I just via social media started being contacted by other people that would ask me to do, you know, television shows or various like short circus contract gigs, and then COVID hit.
Hmm.
So it was, yeah, everything kind of fell apart. I did still end up going to Germany to do a TV show there. And it is interesting because you can tell that a lot of the TV shows, especially if they're like talent based ones, they want you to be the chubby, inspirational person. And I'm like, that's cool. I know what role you want me to fill, but I'm going to make sure I fill it in a way that is professional and aspirational and not something that you're like, ah ha ha, let's laugh at a fat person.
Hmm. And also, it's hard when like you walk into something, they already have like a role written for you, and they don't really leave space for who you actually are.
Yes. When I did AGT, they're a lot less flexible, and the producers are way more controlling of what you put out there. But then when I've done comparable shows in Europe, they were a lot more chill, and they're just like, oh, what do you want to do? Okay, cool. Like, they didn't even ask to see my act beforehand. They're just like, show up, do your thing, have fun. Like, okay, cool. And I had like one judge who, mind you, they don't actually know anything about circus. And the guy was like, well, I felt like there was a lot of spinning and poses, but I wanted more than that. And I'm like, that's Basically just like saying, I don't like what 70% of aerial is. Like, what do you want me to do?
I know you're a singer, but I didn't like the part where you made noises with your mouth.
Exactly. Yeah. I was like, did you miss the part off my toes?
Have you ever had an experience where you were hired for a job and
Mhm.
then you felt like once you were already there or once you were actually like in the space doing the thing, they wanted to change you?
Yes, I actually went and did a music video shoot, and for this one, they wanted a fan dancer. And, burlesque has got all that stuff, pull out my fans, go to the place. And you could tell they were just like, oh, we didn't know you were going to be fat. Like, and so they were just kind of cold and weird to me. And then they sent me home before filming because a group of people showed up and were like, oh, we'll just do stuff for free. And then so they're like, oh, well, we'll just send you home with half pay. Which is, a whole nother discussion we have to have. Like, dear performers, aerialists, all of that, it doesn't matter how much fun it is. Don't do something that is people's jobs for free.
When I lived in New York, the mentality of performing for free, so different than here. So,
Yeah.
so, so different. In New York, it's like, I got to dance today. And here it's like, I'm sorry, you want to pay me only €100? No, 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 no.
That's a huge issue around here too. It's like just because you're having fun doing it does not mean this isn't somebody's job.
Yeah,
It may be your hobby, but it's somebody else's job. And your standard muggle, they're just like, oh, wow, you did the splits. That is the height of acrobatic acuity. So they're not necessarily understanding the difference between a professional and a hobbyist.
literally the easiest move in your act, and everyone applauds. And then you do something that's like insanely hard and no one knows. And you're like, are there other plus size areas that you would like to shout out? Because obviously I'm going to put links to your social media in the description of this video, so make sure you check that out. But is there anyone else that you'd like to shout out, or just aerialist in general? Because I mean, it's great to find new people to be obsessed with.
I would specifically shout out certain groups, like the Larger Than Life Facebook group is a really excellent way to get in touch with other people. I also really like the American Circus Educators. I did a workshop with them this past year about this subject and about working with plus size students. And I really appreciated the enthusiasm that people brought to that. When it comes to performers, I literally only know like one other professional plus size aerialist, and I can't pronounce her name because she's incredibly Russian.
Well,
But
send it to me and I'll put her in the description. Is there anything else that you'd like to throw out there?
I just want to encourage people that if you want to try aerial dance, go and try it. Just try it and don't expect to be amazing off the bat. You are there to have fun. Don't focus so much on, well, what did I accomplish? Focus on, did I have fun today? That's what it's for. When people talk about stage presence and enjoying watching a performer, they enjoy watching other people have fun. If you're having fun on stage, the audience has fun watching you.
100%. Well, it's been so lovely to have this chat with you. Thank you so much for doing this. This has been really, really fun. And it's been a pleasure to talk with you and to meet you face to face at
Yes.
last. I'm going to have all your social media in the description. So you guys watching, make sure that you check it out and make sure that you check out the rest of my channel. I've got all kinds of tutorials and sort of broader subject videos like this one. I do videos on Wednesdays and Saturdays. And I will see you guys next time.